Hello there, and welcome. It's so lovely to have you here. Wherever you are tonight, whether it's the end of a long day, the hush of a quiet afternoon, or the early stillness of morning, I invite you now to take a breath and just be here with me for a little while. Tonight, we'll take a slow and gentle journey through time. No urgency, no noise, just a quiet step into the past, where everyday moments were woven with silence, candlelight, and wind. We won't hurry. We're simply drifting into history, like a leaf on water, soft and unrushed. If you enjoy these peaceful stories and they help you rest, you're welcome to like or subscribe, but only if it feels right to you. And if you'd like, I'd be so glad to hear from you in the comments. Let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always comforting to imagine others, scattered across the map, quietly sharing this moment too. So, if you haven't already, this is your invitation to get cozy. Make a warm drink, dim the lights, and settle into whatever brings you comfort. A favorite chair, your bed, or a soft space all your own. The story is ready now, and whenever you are, we'll begin. You wake before the sun breaks the ridgeline. The cold has not yet lifted its grip from the thatched walls, and your breath rolls like smoke into the pale dimness. Around you, the longhouse sleeps in slow silence. Woolen curtains hang from the rafters like winter fog, separating sleeping places, but not the warmth. It passes gently from person to person, hearth to blanket, child to elder. You lie still, eyes open, watching the shadows shift above. The smell is familiar and layered, the low tang of dried fish, pine smoke from last night's embers, and the faint sweetness of crushed juniper. You are wrapped in thick, heavy wool. A fox-fur collar tickles your neck, stiff from years of wear. You've worn it since your journey here, a crossing from a storm-kissed village up the coast. A month gone now. You'd come with a trade boat and stayed for the quiet. That was the reason you gave aloud. But there are other reasons too, softer ones. You needed a place where silence did not feel empty. A rooster calls far off in the frost-blanched dark. You stretch your feet against the worn rushes under your bedroll and ease upward, careful not to wake the boy sleeping near your knees. Ivar, the carpenter's son, taken in last summer when his mother died of fever. He mumbles something soft and curls into the shape of a shell. You let him be. You lift the curtain aside. The fire pit in the center of the hall is a dull red crescent of ash and coal. No flames, but the stone still holds warmth. You kneel beside it and place your hands on the hearth's rim, feeling the ancient heat return slowly to your fingers. With practiced care, you place dry moss and pine shavings into the ash and breathe once. Then again. A coil of flame lifts, dances, takes hold. The first fire of the day. Behind you, footsteps. Soft, steady. You do not turn. The scent tells you it's Fridays. She kneels beside you, presses her palms to the stones. Still warm, she whispers. You nod. She doesn't ask where you went yesterday evening, or why you stood alone on the cliff edge after supper. Fridas never asks such things. She has a talent for being near without demanding. Her hands are weathered, cracked at the knuckles. She smells of smoked sea trout and salt brine, and always pine resin. Together, you set the small cauldron over the flame. The barley mash inside has steeped overnight. You stir it slowly, watching the grains swell and release their nutty steam. A hint of old goat's milk and juniper berries rises into the air. It is not sweet, but it is enough. The others stir now. You hear the first cough, the shuffle of leather boots, a spoon knocking the lip of a bowl. The house wakes gently, as it always does in winter. No sudden noise, no loud voices. Even the children know. Sound travels too easily in this close wooden world. You carry the pot to the low table with fried ice, ladle by ladle, filling earthen bowls. Ivar wakes and pads over, rubbing one eye with the heel of his hand. You give him the bowl with the largest berry floating on top. He grins through a mouth still warm with dreams. Mid-morning comes slowly. Outside, the light crawls down the far mountain in dusty streaks, like fingers brushing linen. You step into it, pulling your wool cloak tight across your chest. The wind is sharp today, a little louder than usual. Snow from the hills has started to melt, not from warmth, but from the way sun lingers longer in this turning season. It is the first edge of thaw. You carry your tools down toward the water. The air smells cleaner here, touched with salt and iron and the faint sour-sweet rot of wet wood. Gulls will lazily overhead, dipping and rising like thoughts you haven't spoken yet. Your small tasks await you. A net to mend, bone toggles to carve, a blade that lost its edge last week. They are not important jobs, but they keep your hands busy, your breath slow. You sit on a flat stone just beyond the drying racks, tools in your lap. The net is stiff with salt. You bend it gently between your fingers, work the thread into the tear. The rhythm is easy. Loop-pull loop, the kind of work that lets your mind drift. Fridas joins you again. She carries a bundle of tangled wool, hers to spin. She sits without a word. The two of you pass the morning this way, together and apart. You do not speak until the sun touches your shoulders. You ever think about crossing west? She asks softly. Her eyes are still on her hands, twisting wool into thread. You shake your head. She nods, as if your silence confirms something for her. Me neither. Too many people talking of Iceland, like it's made of gold and answers. I think maybe it's just more rock. You smile. And cold. That too. The moment passes. The wind kicks up. You both pull your cloaks tighter. By midday the sun has reached the fjord's edge. Light spills and silver threads across the water. You stand and stretch your spine, joints creaking like old oars. A few younger men haul nets to the smokehouse. They wave in your direction. One of them, Eric, a quiet boy with a gap between his teeth, offers you a slice of cured trout. You take it, chew slowly. It tastes of salt, ash, and late autumn. Back in the longhouse, the midday meal is quieter than breakfast. People sit in pairs or alone, chewing, sipping broth, eyes heavy. The fire is hotter now. The smoke curls upward in tight spirals. Ivar sits at your feet, drawing on a sliver of birch bark with a charred stick. You look down. He's drawn a boat, long and sharp, with stars overhead and waves below. Is that yours? You ask. He nods, then pauses. No, yours, when you leave. You don't answer. You reach down and smooth his hair. He leans into it. The longhouse settles again. Outside, the light has softened into a quiet blur. Not quite gold, not yet gray. You sit near the fire and let its warmth wrap your hands like a familiar coat. Fridas hums a song from her corner, low and tuneless, more vibration than melody. Someone sleeps nearby, breathing slow. You think of nothing, and then of everything. The people who lived before you, and those who will take your place. You think of snow falling on nets, of bread that never rises, of voices that stay even after they stop speaking. You close your eyes for a moment, just long enough to forget where your body ends and the longhouse begins. Outside, a soft wind blows from the north, carrying the scent of seaweed and spruce. Inside, you rest in the quiet glow, your hands folded like driftwood on your knees. The sun has risen high but remains shy, never fierce, never loud. It presses against the longhouse walls like a sleeping animal, casting a warm blur across the floorboards. The fire has been trimmed to a quiet glow, and the smell of broth and bitter herbs lingers in the wool of your cloak. You stand. Your legs feel heavy in that pleasant, empty way that follows rest. Outside, the village exhales its midday stillness. The wind is calmed. The fjord lies almost motionless, a silken sheet stitched with ripples where gulls trace the surface. A thin line of wood smoke rises from every roof, each with its own silent story cooking beneath it. Fridas is spinning by the doorway, the spindle twisting like a falling leaf between her fingers. She does not look up when you pass, but she hums again, that same formless tune from earlier, rising and sinking like a remembered dream. You wonder if it is words, or if the words were long forgotten. Your boots crunch lightly on the gravel path as you walk. No one stops you. This hour is a quiet one, neither work nor leisure, just time moving like the tide. A few children chase each other between drying racks, their laughter the only sharpness in the air. A black chicken struts near your heel, muttering to itself in clucks. Your feet take you toward the elder's home without much thought. It sits apart from the others, closer to the rocks, where the sun strikes longest and the wind curves around like a respectful hand. The path is narrow and muddy, bordered by creeping lichen and dry stalks of angelica. You pause to pick one, crush it between your fingers. The scent is sharp, earthy, with a sweetness like morning bread. You reach the door and knock with 2 fingers. A pause, then the sound of a latch. The door opens inward with a soft wooden sigh. "Come in," she says, already turning. Her name is Halla, though no one calls her that anymore. Now she's mere Halla, Mother Halla, though she bore no children. Her hair is white and wispy as birch bark, tied back in a leather cord. Her home smells of dried apples, beeswax, and the faint medicinal tang of crushed fennel. It is not large, but every corner holds a purpose. She gestures for you to sit beside the hearth, where dried fish bones dangle on a length of cord like a wind chime. "You walk lightly," she says, pouring something from a clay jug into 2 carved cups. "You always did. You smile, and you always hear it." She hands you the cup. The liquid is warm, faintly sour, sweetened with honey and thyme. She calls it Jartadrikker, heart drink, though you suspect the name came long before the recipe. Outside, gulls cry low. A distant dog barks once, then silence again. Halla sits opposite you, folding her knees under her with the ease of someone half her age. Her fingers are stained with elderberry, her sleeves rolled high. She studies you for a moment, then begins pulling a piece of woolen cloth from a basket near her side. "I'm weaving a story," she says softly, "or trying to, but the thread keeps lying to me." You lean closer. The cloth is deep blue, darker than fjord water at dusk, threaded with irregular silver lines. "What is it meant to show?" you ask. She shrugs. "The wind, or a memory, or both." You sip the drink. It warms your chest in a slow, spiraling way. "You remember everything, don't you?" She smiles without teeth. "I remember the things that are quiet." The afternoon ripens like fruit left too long in the sun, soft and golden. You sit a while longer, helping Halla sort a bundle of yarns dyed with crushed roots. She speaks little, and only when the silence has finished what it needs to say. She shows you how to separate the threads with your thumb, how to feel for knots with the edge of your nail. These are not the things you came to learn, and yet here you are. When you finally leave, the light has shifted. Shadows stretch longer across the ground now, drawing gentle angles from rooftops to stones. The village feels even quieter, as if holding its breath before the next breeze. Somewhere nearby, someone plays a mouth harp, the notes barely more than vibration, like a heartbeat remembered from a womb. You take the long way back, along the path by the cliff. The air is cooler, tinged with salt and something green. Sea kale curls near the rocks, pale and waxy. You crouch and touch its leaves. still firm, still alive. Below you, the fjord is waking from its stillness. The tide is turning. A small boat, likely Bjarni's, slips through the water with soft labor. Two figures move with oars, steady and slow. It is not a good fishing day, but they will come back with something. They always do. You sit on a flat rock overlooking the water. It is smooth and sun-warmed. You rest your hands on your knees, close your eyes. For a time, nothing moves. The world presses inward. The hum of wind, the creak of your bones, the quiet logic of your breath. You think of your old village, of the boat you left behind, of the woman who asked you one spring to stay and plant flax. You hadn't answered. Not yes, not no. And now the flax is someone else's. You open your eyes. The fjord is brighter now. Light shimmers where a gull dives, then rises again, its wings slick with the ocean sheen. When you return to the village center, a group of women and two older boys are gathering beside the communal loom, stretched wide under the eaves of the largest home. This is where the heavier weaving is done. Cloaks, wall hangings, the winter shrouds. You approach, and Frida sees you. She lifts her chin in a quiet invitation. You step into the shade of the loom. The women make space without asking questions. They know your hands. You've helped mend sails and soften flax since the second week you arrived. The loom creaks as they adjust the tension. Fridas hands you a bundle of weft thread, soft, uneven, will dyed the color of sunburned heather. You begin to pass it through the warp in rhythm with the others. Back and forth, under and over, like tides, like breath. No one speaks much. There is no need. Occasionally, someone hums a line of an old song, and the others follow. Never fully, just enough to feel the thread of memory pass between them. The sun lowers as you work. A baby cries and is quieted with a soft shush and the smell of warm milk. Somewhere nearby, a man chops wood with the slow, even rhythm of someone in no hurry. A pair of dogs chase each other near the smokehouse, then collapse in a heap beneath the cart. You weave. You listen. You breathe. The cloth grows longer. Someone chuckles softly at a missed thread. Someone else corrects it with a touch so gentle it might be a blessing. Eventually, the weaving slows. Fridas ties off the final row and brushes her hands clean. The others begin to drift away, folding baskets under arms, gathering cloaks. You stay behind for a moment, watching the finished cloth sway in the breeze. Fridas stands beside you, stretching her back. "This one's for the Jarl," she says, "but the pattern's mine." You nod. "I saw." She smiles. "He won't." The two of you stand there for a time, watching the cloth dance in the golden light. The wind picks up again, soft, not cold, brushing your face like a mother's hand. You close your eyes and let it pass through you. When you open them again, the village is cast in amber. The light is thick now, golden, almost honeyed. It pours through the seams of rooftops, settles in the dips between stones, rests like warmth in the hollow of your palm. The village glows, not from fire, not yet, but from the soft slant of sun on snow-dusted earth. The way pine needles glint before dusk, the way will catch his light as it's folded and set aside. You are walking slowly. There is no reason to hurry. The weaving is done. Your hands smell faintly of lanolin and iron from the tools, and your shoulders ache in that gentle, purposeful way that follows work completed among good people. You pass between the houses. Smoke is thickened in the air, now rich with promise. Roasted root vegetables, salted fish warming on flat stones, meat simmering with herbs. The smell of onions, thyme, and old goat stock touches the back of your throat, stirs a hunger you had forgotten in the rhythm of the loom. You are not alone on the path. Others walk too, quietly. A few nod. One offers a tired smile. pulling a sled of kindling behind him. No words, none needed. At the center of the village, the longhouse doors are open now. A breeze curls through them, lifting the edge of a woolen curtain. Inside, the hearth is burning, brighter than this morning, casting an amber flicker along the walls. Shadows sway gently on the timber beams. You step inside. The room is alive with motion, but it moves slowly, fluidly. Bowls are passed, spoons set, wooden mugs placed with care. Children carry baskets of dried herbs, guided by mothers or aunts who murmur small reminders with warm tones and patient glances. You see Fridas near the hearth, arranging bundles of turnips and leeks beside a shallow pot. Her sleeves are tied above her elbows, and her hair, usually braided, hangs loose today. A sign, perhaps, that this evening is more than ordinary. You set down your tools near the bench, and she nods toward a pot beside her. "Stir that," she says gently. "Keep it slow." The broth is thick, dark with barley and wild onion. You find a spoon, long-handled, carved with interlaced rings, and begin to stir. The scent rises, richer now. There's meat in it too, smoked lamb by the smell, and perhaps a hint of dried juniper. It fills your chest, reminds you of long winters and comfort found in small things. Fridas wipes her hands on a strip of flax and leans against the wall. "Mir Hallis telling stories tonight," she says. You glance over. In the far corner, near the carved post where the elder sits during winter gatherings, a thick fur has been laid. A small stool rests beside it, set with a bowl of dried berries and warm water. She hasn't spoken in weeks, you say. Fridas shrugs. The stars are clearer now. Sometimes that pulls words from her. You keep stirring. The broth bubbles once, sighs, then settles again. The meal is served just as the sky turns violet. Not yet dark, but no longer light. The color of a bruise on the edge of sleep. Everyone gathers. Some sit cross-legged on furs. Others on benches worn smooth by years of elbows and elbows again. The room feels smaller now, in the best way. Held. The fire crackles. The wood used tonight is from fallen birch, dry and fragrant. It snaps and sighs as it burns, releasing a sweetness that curls around your ankles, into your clothes, your hair. You eat slowly. The stew is hot and thick, clings to the spoon, fills the mouth with warmth and salt and smoke. Ivar is beside you again, tucked into the crook of your leg, humming quietly between bites. His bowl is stained with bits of barley and grease. You wipe his chin with the edge of your sleeve, and he leans against you, too tired to pretend at pride. Fridas sits nearby, speaking in a low voice with one of the older boys about curing hides. Her hands never stop moving, breaking bread, slicing apple, brushing crumbs from a cloth. You wonder if her hands rest even in sleep. The noise is soft, spoons tapping, a murmur here, a cough there. Occasionally someone laughs, but even that sound is rounded, gentle. This is not a feast. It is something quieter, something held together by hunger and gratitude and the memory of frost. And then, as the bowls are emptied and the steam begins to fade, the room stills. Heads turn. Halla is rising. She stands slowly, with the careful grace of someone whose bones remember wind. Her staff is beside her, carved from driftwood, capped with a stone shaped like an egg. No one moves to help her. She does not need it. The firelight plays on her cheeks, deepens the lines beside her eyes. She looks around the room, not urgently, not to command, but as if listening for the right silence. When she finds it, she begins. Her voice is lower than you remember. Not weak, just warm, like the edge of an old blade that still cuts, but leaves the wound clean. She tells of a winter long before yours, of ice that crept into walls, froze water inside wooden cups, of a child who vanished in the snow and returned with hands too blue to save. But that is not the story's heart. The story is about what the mother did. How she went to the stones at the edge of the fjord, not to weep, but to speak. She sang to the sea in a language that no longer has words, only shapes. She placed her hands in the tide and waited. And the next day, the child began to breathe again. There's no proof, Halla says. No rune written, no song remembered, but she knows it true. She saw it. She ends the story not with a lesson, but a breath. The room remains quiet for a moment longer than it should. Then someone sighs. Then the spell breaks, gently. A log shifts in the hearth. Sparks rise like lazy insects. You look down and realize Ivar is asleep against your side, mouth open slightly, fist curled in your cloak. You do not move. Fridas catches your eye and smiles. You both say nothing. The elder lowers herself back to her fur with the help of the boy, who had once been too proud to braid his own belt. He does not speak either. The fire burns lower. Someone begins clearing bowls. Someone else adds a log to the coals. The longhouse breathes in and out. Later, you slip outside for a moment, just to feel the air. The sky is a dome of deep velvet. Stars have arrived. They do not shimmer, not yet. They hang steady, patient, waiting for sleep to find you. The cold is sharp on your cheeks. You welcome it. It reminds you that the body is here, real, held together by warmth and hunger and memory. And sleep comes, not like a fall, but like a tide. You sit on the edge of the stoop, pulling your cloak tighter. From here, the fjord is barely visible, just a darker dark against the sky. But you know it's there. You can smell it, salt moss, woodrot, and wind. A smell that speaks of distance and returning. Behind you, the longhouse murmurs. A lullaby hum. The rattle of a spoon in a cup. The hush of wool against wood. You stay there until your fingers begin to ache. And then you rise. You step quietly back inside. Lay Ivar down on his bedroll. Cover him with a thick fur. He doesn't stir. You remove your boots, set them near the wall, and lie down beside the fire. Fridas is already resting. Halla too. The flames cast long shadows across the beams, like arms reaching for something just out of sight. You close your eyes. The night deepens, slow and velvet rich. Inside the longhouse, the last of the fire settles into a warm amber hush. The logs no longer crackle. They exhale. Glowing beneath a cradle of ash, the heat remains. It radiates through the packed earthen floor, curling around bare feet, curling beneath woolen cloaks, curling beneath dreams. You lie still. Blankets weigh gently over your chest, heavy with lanolin and history. The fur beneath your cheeks smells faintly of the sea and something older, pine smoke, years ago, from a fire that warmed other hands. Your breath slows. You match it to the flicker of flame light dancing behind your closed lids. Around you, others have fallen into sleep, some breathing softly, some snoring in waves like distant surf. Ivar shifts beside you, murmurs a sound not meant for language, then falls silent again. From outside, the wind returns. It's not sharp now, not the kind that cuts. This wind brushes against the longhouse walls like fingers on old linen, sighing as it moves between beams. It smells of melting frost and pine bark, of stone cooled by moonlight. A sound older than speech. It finds its way through the eaves, and you welcome it. You are not entirely asleep, but not entirely awake. A rustle across the room, soft a foot on rushes. You open your eyes, only a little. The firelight catches her silhouette, Fridas, rising from her bed place. She moves like someone born to the dark, every step sure, every pause measured. She wraps her cloak tight and lifts the curtain near the door. The cold slips in as she passes. You wait a moment, listening to the quiet she leaves behind. Then you follow. Outside, the world is made of shadow and silver. Moonlight rests on every surface. The rooftops, the sled tracks frozen in the dirt, the ridge of snow piled near the fish racks. It is not full, the moon, a little more than half, but it casts enough to see your breath in silver. Freydis is not far ahead. She walks toward the fjord path, her boots pressing softly against the icy earth. You follow, quietly, your own footfalls muffled by the hush of night. She doesn't look back, but she knows you're there. You know she knows. It's an old understanding, one formed in shared labor, in silence beside looms, in glances passed across steam and bread. The village behind you slumbers. Ahead, the fjord waits. The path winds between twisted trees, pine and birch, their trunks ghost pale in the moonlight. A patch of frost-lichen glows softly along a rock. Beneath your soles, the dirt is frozen, but not cruel. The cold clings, but it does not bite. Not tonight. You reach the overlook. It's a cliff not steep, but high enough to see far. Below, the fjord lies still, black as obsidian. No boats now. No gulls. Just the faint shimmer of stars reflected, broken gently by the slow breath of water. Freydis sits on a stone bench, carved long ago by hands that remember glaciers. She does not speak. She wraps her arms around her knees and leans forward slightly, like a flame listening to its own warmth. You sit beside her. The wind carries silence between you. You look up. The stars are clearer than you've seen in weeks, not because the sky is new, but because you are still enough now to see it. They do not twinkle. They hold. Old light from old fires. You imagine them not as pinpricks, but as glowing runes pressed into the fabric of night. Messages from something vast, or nothing at all. Freydis exhales slow. I used to think the stars were gods, she says softly. You glance at her, but say nothing. She continues. Before I was old enough to be told otherwise, I thought they watched us. Little lights that followed your story. She picks up a pebble and rolls it in her hand. Then I learned they're just things. Balls of fire. Far away. Doesn't sound nearly as kind, does it? You smile faintly. Maybe they're both. You say. She doesn't answer, but after a moment, she leans her shoulder against yours. Just lightly, like the weight of a thought that didn't need speaking. Below, the water glints as if breathing. You remember a story Halla told last winter, about a woman who walked into the fjord, fully clothed, on a night like this. Not to drown, not to vanish, just to step into something deeper. She returned before dawn, they said, and when she did, her hair smelled of time, and her eyes saw things that had not yet happened. You don't know if it was true, but you understand the pull of still water beneath stars. Beside you, Freydis has closed her eyes. She is not asleep, just listening to the wind, to the faint lap of tide, to the heart that beats in the rock beneath your feet. You watch her for a moment, then close your eyes, too. The quiet between the two of you stretches, not in distance, in depth. Your mind drifts to nets drying in salt air, to Ivor's drawings on birch bark, to the smell of mead warmed with herbs, to the way Halla's voice wrapped the story around the room like smoke, to the loom's rhythm, the touch of thread against your palm, to the long silence in your chest when you first stepped off the boat onto this shore. And you realize something. You don't miss the noise anymore. You don't miss the name you haven't spoken since autumn, like a name whispered only by the wind. You miss something simpler, but that something, you may have found it here. You open your eyes. Freydis is watching you. For a moment, neither of you speaks. Then she smiles, not the kind made for others, the kind people give when they recognize themselves in your silence. We should go back, she says. You nod. The walk is slower now. Your steps match each other without trying. Two shadows sliding over moonlight. Two breaths curling into the dark. You pass the same lichened rock, the same pines, the same crooked fence, and yet it all feels quieter now, as if your presence has been accepted. You reach the longhouse. Its walls glow faintly from within. The fire is still alive. Fridas opens the door and steps inside. You follow. The warmth embraces you. Not hot, just enough. Inside, no one stirs. The longhouse is a world of sleeping forms and gently glowing embers. Wool and fur and the rustle of someone shifting in sleep. You remove your cloak and hang it near the door. Fridas returns to her place beside the back wall, curling into her bedding with the ease of someone who knows she belongs. You lie down again near Ivar. He sighs in his sleep and rolls toward you, hand outstretched, fingers brushing your arm. You place your hand over his and leave it there. The fire hums. The stars outside remain, but your eyes are closed now, and the quiet holds you. The fjord will still be there in the morning. So will the net, the loom, the birds, the breath between stories. Sleep finds you not with suddenness, but with certainty, like a shore finally reached. The morning mist curls over the western sea like smoke from a long-forgotten fire. Somewhere inland, a raven calls. Its voice does not echo. The air is too thick, too wet with fog and salt. Beyond the low hills, a single boat rocks gently in the tidal shallows, its curved prow rising like a question toward the gray sky. A woman stands nearby, alone. She is wrapped in a cloak the color of worn slate, its wool heavy with dew. Her hands are bare, though the air is sharp with late spring's indecision. Beneath her hood, her face is still, not solemn, not burdened, simply quiet. The face of someone who no longer asks the sea for answers. Her name is Kettle's daughter, but few call her that now. They call her Unenchga, Aud the deep-minded. She does not know who gave her the name first. Perhaps it was a merchant in Dublin who watched her refuse to kneel before her husband's rivals, or a fisherman's wife in the Hebrides, after seeing how she spoke with her servants, not above them, but beside them. Maybe it was her son before he died. He always had a gift for seeing what others missed. She does not wear the title. She carries it, like everything else. The tide rolls in, soft as breath, wetting the hem of her cloak. She does not move. Behind her, the voices of her household drift like threads on the wind, low and unhurried. Some are freedmen. Some were once bound to her service by law and coin. Now they stay by choice. Their laughter is quiet. It doesn't need to reach her. She knows they are warm. She looks to the sea. This place, this wide, silver-edged stretch of water tucked between headlands, will do. Aud is not young, not old either. Somewhere between. Her joints no longer glide without thought, but her eyes miss nothing. She has traveled far, farther than most women, farther than many men, across green kingdoms and red battles, across betrayal and frost, from the halls of Dublin stone and iron to the bog-soft fields of the Scottish coast. From there west again, to this cold edge of Iceland. Here the world is softer, rough but honest. The land does not lie. It yields only what you ask with patience. Aud has patience. The night before, she had stood by the fire in her shelter, tracing a map not drawn but remembered, coastlines, stars, the way the wind smells near Orkney, the crunch of gravel underfoot when approaching the isthmus in Caithness. Every journey she has taken has marked her, not with wounds, but with quiet. Now she watches the waves. A gull passes overhead, low and silent. Its wings do not stir the air. There will be work here. Soil to test, driftwood to gather, stones to move. but the land will hold. She can feel it. This will be the place. Later that morning, she walks the perimeter with two others, an older man named Bergthur, who once served her father in Norway, and a girl named Lifa, who came to her household in the Hebrides and never left. They speak little. Aud walks ahead, marking points with small cairns of stone. Lifa follows, making notations on a strip of bark, the charcoal gripped tight in her left hand. Bergthur offers a quiet comment now and then about soil, about windbreak, about wolves. Aud nods. She listens. At the western edge of the land, where a narrow stream curves like a question through low grass, she stops. "This is where I will build," she says. Her voice is low, unhurried. It rolls like distant thunder, a thing that moves through the world without needing to explain itself. Bergthur nods. He looks at the slope, the way the sun touches it. He sees what she sees. Shelter, warmth, water, a place that does not pretend to be more than it is. Lifa ties the bark into a coil and tucks it into her pouch. "Do you want a name for it yet?" she asks. Aud is silent for a moment. "No," she says. "Let earn its name." By midday, the others gather. There are 23 of them. Men, women, children. All of them travelers. Some were born in chains. Some ran from kings. Some followed the promise of land. All of them followed her. She does not command them. She guides. They begin the work without ceremony. Stones are moved. Sod is cut. Posts are carved. Each task small and exact, but done with care. The children collect driftwood. The women braid flax. The men dig the first trench for the longhouse frame. Aud watches, then joins them, her sleeves rolled, her knees in the earth. She does not stand apart. Her authority does not wear ornament. That night, when the stars emerge, faint but steady, they light the first fire in a ring of stones, and Didi kneels beside it, cupping her hands around the flame. The wind does not extinguish it. Days pass, then weeks. The house rises slowly, then quickly. Each piece fits with the next like memory into habit. They plant turnips. They smoke fish. They braid cords for rain cloaks. Aud spends much of her time walking, not far, but often around the hills, to the stream, to the sea. She marks new paths with stones. She builds nothing without walking first. One evening, she stands near the shoreline with Lifa. The girl has grown bolder in recent months, and her questions now come more easily. "Do you think your son would have liked it here?" she asks. Aud does not answer right away. She watches the tide. The water is darker now, touched by moonlight. "No," she says, "but he would have stayed." Lifa nods, though she's not certain she understands. Aud continues. He wanted what couldn't last, but he knew how to hold things while they did. They stand there a while longer. Then they return home. It is midsummer when the house is finally complete. By then, the settlement has a rhythm, measured and slow. Each day follows the last, like one stitch into another. The sheep are calmed. The children grow taller. The nights are no longer cold. Aud sits by the fire and weaves. Not often, but when she does, her hands are steady. One of the children brings her a spindle carved with her father's symbol, a mark she hasn't seen since the crossing. She turns it in her hand, once, then again, and sets it aside without comment. Others begin to call the place Vamr. It means hollow, but kindly, a protected place, a curve in the land that holds. Aud says nothing, but she does not correct them. One morning in late summer, a traveler arrives, a merchant, lean and wide-eyed, carrying tales like bread under his arm. He brings news of Norway, of old loyalties broken, of new kings. He does not recognize Aud until she speaks. He drops to one knee. She tells him to rise. They share a meal. The man eats quickly, clearly unaccustomed to stillness. He praises the house, the land, the efficiency of her people. Then he asks if she would like to send a message, perhaps to Norway, perhaps to Dublin. AUD shakes her head. No message, she says. She offers him a place to sleep. He declines. The next morning, he is gone. That evening, as the sun slips behind a western hill, AUD stands at the edge of her land. The wind is soft. The grass leans. She listens. The sea is far, but she can still hear it. She closes her eyes. And for a moment, she feels something. Not pride, not regret. Something simpler. The quiet of something becoming what it was meant to be. The morning mist does not lift quickly. It lingers in the low hollows of Vammer, curling over fences, trailing through the furrows of newly turned soil. It wraps itself around fence posts and sheep legs, making them look ghost-like, slow-moving through wool-thick air. But it does not bite. It is a soft mist, one that carries the smell of wet bark and crushed clover, a scent that settles deep in the lungs and stays. AUD wakes early, as she always does. Not from need. There are no more battles to prepare for, no courtly feasts to organize, no cargo to count before dockside disputes. She wakes from rhythm now, from habit, from the feel of morning itself moving through her bones, a rhythm older than worry. The longhouse is quiet. A few snores echo faintly from the far sleeping ends. She moves without sound, pulls a fur-lined cloak over her shoulders, and steps outside. The light is dim gray-blue. The sun has not yet cleared the hills. She walks toward the southern plots. There's no reason, really. The walk is short, the plots already checked, the fences mended just yesterday. But she finds herself drawn to the field anyway, the one beside the shallow stream where the barley grew tallest last season, the place she gave to Koli. Koli is already there. He stands at the edge of his field, arms crossed loosely, wool sleeves rolled to his elbows. His boots are thick with dew. A gull's cry cuts through the morning, and he turns slightly, sees her. He lifts one hand, a brief motion, not a wave, not a salute, just an acknowledgement of shared time and air. She nods back. AUD approaches slowly. Her steps leave soft prints in the damp grass. "You're up early," she says. He shrugs, watching the mist drift over the stream. So's the rye. AUD smiles faintly. "And is that a problem?" He glances at her. Not unless it's trying to be clever. The joke is quiet, dry. She lets it hang in the space between them. They stand together in silence, looking out over the field. The sprouts are thin but strong. Some have pushed past their woven covers, reaching for a sun that still hides behind the slope. Koli adjusts the leather strap at his belt. "I wasn't sure it would hold," he says. "The soil's heavy here. Thought it might choke." "It still might," AUD replies. He chuckles once, softly. "Your confidence is inspiring." She shrugs. It's honest. They fall silent again. Koli has been with her for many years. He was once a thrall, taken not by war but by debt. His father had borrowed against a boat he didn't own, and when the lender came to collect, the son was all he could offer. Koli never spoke much at that time, and Deudi never asked. She learned all she needed from how he stood when he wasn't being watched, always slightly tilted, like someone unsure whether to lean forward or flee. But time changes things. Or rather, it lets them unfold. He had come with her when she left Dublin, helped pack the last of her household, said nothing when she named him a free man before they sailed, said even less when she offered him land once they reached Iceland. He had simply nodded, then started building. "Do you regret it?" he asks now. AUD raises an eyebrow, not quite looking at him. "Regret what?" "Letting us go. The land. The names. Giving it all away before you had to." She doesn't answer immediately. She watches a spider weave a line between two fence posts, the web catching dew like glass beads. "No," she says at last. "It was never mine to keep." Coley shifts his weight. "That's not what most say. I'm not most." "No," he agrees. "You're not." They walk the edge of the field together. He points out where the posts need repair. She nods. He mentions a patch of wild thyme growing too close to the rye. She makes a note to harvest it for drying before it seeds. At the far corner, where the stream bends and the rocks grow moss thick, he stops. There's a flat stone there, large enough for sitting. He brushes it clean with his cloak and gestures. They sit. Birdsong begins now, faint and spaced apart. Thrushes and wagtails, testing the morning. Coley leans back on his palms, looking up at the sky. "I've been thinking," he says, "about names." Aud waits. "People still call me Coley the Freed. Even now, even here." She says nothing. He sighs. "It's strange. You get a new name to mark your freedom, but it always reminds you what you used to be." There's a quiet irony in his voice. Not bitter, just well-worn. Aud brushes a loose strand of hair from her face. "You could change it." "To what?" "To whatever comes next." He chuckles again. Easy to say, but names stick. "So do weeds," she says. "Doesn't mean you can't pull them." He nods, but doesn't answer. They sit a while longer. The sun finally reaches them, not directly, but filtered through the hill's curve, soft and gold-tinged. It brushes against their boots, their hands, the tops of the barley shoots just beginning to tremble in the breeze. Coley runs a hand across his face, as if clearing fog from his own thoughts. "Do you ever wonder what your father would say?" he asks. Aud's mouth presses into a line. "About what?" "About this. All of it. You. Here, building a hall on the edge of nowhere. Naming slaves free. Planting turnips instead of flags." She thinks for a long time. Then, "I think he'd have questions." Coley laughs, a full laugh now, dry but warm. "I imagine he would. But he'd understand," she adds. "Eventually." He looks at her, surprised. "Because the sea changes everyone," she says simply. "Even him." The rest of the morning unfolds slowly. They part at the edge of the field. Coley returns to his fence mending. Aud walks back toward the hall, her boots damp, her thoughts lighter than they were. Inside, the fire has been stirred. Leafaw is grinding grain at the low stone, her hand steady, her sleeves rolled. A pot of early nettle soup simmers nearby, scented with salt and fennel. The air is warm, lived in. Aud removes her cloak, hangs it near the door. She pauses a moment, watching the way the steam rises from the soup pot. The morning is not remarkable. There's been no omen, no thunder, no message from gods or ghosts. But something has shifted, and it is enough. She crosses the room, lifts a cloth from the basket, and begins folding. The weather turned lightly in the night. A thin veil of frost settled along the ridgelines, tracing each stalk of rye and rush with fine white breath. Beneath it, the land still held its warmth, not from sun, not from season, but from having been lived in, from footsteps and furrows and the slow shaping hand of care. Aud rose with delight, as usual, and now walks the field's edge with a small blade in her hand. She is not hunting. She is cutting herbs, angelica, wild mint, early shoots of arnica. Their leaves are still stiff from the cold, their scents sharp and medicinal. She does not rush the work. Each snip of the knife is measured, each bundle bound with twine. When the pouch at her hip is full, she stands for a moment and breathes deeply. The smell of damp earth, early grass, and sea wind all layered and close. Somewhere behind her, a child laughs, and from the hall, the sound of a broom dragging across stone. It is a peaceful morning, as most are now, yet the visitor has arrived. He came the day before, his boat drawn up quietly on the western inlet, sails furled and salt stiff. His name is Orleif, lean and sun-browned, with a way of standing that always leans forward, as though waiting to be questioned. He is not unknown to her. They had met once in the Hebrides years before, when she was arranging passage and he was weighing sheep. A mutual acquaintance. A shared evening over sour mead. Since then, a handful of letters, brief, infrequent, but still familiar. He asked to stay a few days, to rest before heading eastward toward the inland settlements. She agreed, offered him a place beneath the awning by the hearth. He asked little else. Now he sits across from her, in the quiet stillness that follows morning labor. AUD is preparing the herbs, laying each stalk to dry on a wicker mat beside the fire. Orleif watches her hands, not out of curiosity, but because he prefers to avoid her eyes. He clears his throat once. Then again, I passed a grave on the way in, he says finally. Small one, stones stacked like a spindle. AUD does not look up. Yes, someone from your house. No, she says. A traveler. Died in the cold 2 winters ago. We did not know his name. He nods, silent for a moment. Then, you buried him upright. She nods once, tying a bundle. Orleif shifts. That's an old way. I'm an old woman. This time, she looks at him. Not unkindly, not sharply, simply with the weight of her gaze. He offers a small smile, sheepish, but does not press. AUD returns to her work. The fire snaps once, a twig too dry, too thin. Its pop breaks the hush like a thought too loud in a quiet room. Outside, the wind stirs. The sheep bleat low from the pasture. Inside, all is warmth and the slow rhythm of hands and breath. Orleif leans forward, elbows on knees. You still hold to the white god. AUD's hands pause over the herbs, then resume. I do. He nods. You've not said it aloud since arriving. There is no need. The land does not ask. He picks up a stalk of drying mint, twirls it in his fingers. And the others? They follow their own quiets, she says. Thor, Freya, land spirits. They're not mine to name. Orleif places the mint back gently. It's strange, he murmurs, to see peace in that. AUD looks up again. There's no war in silence, she says. They sit for a time without speaking, not out of discomfort, but because the subject, having arrived, needs space to rest between them. In the old days, back in Norway, back in Dublin, these conversations rarely stayed so calm. Faith had edges there, teeth. People sharpened words like knives. Gods were debated with fists and burned doors. But here, on this sparse edge of the world, belief softens. Not into nothing, just into something quieter. Orleif studies the fire. I sometimes wonder, he says, what it means when the land accepts all of us, all our gods, all our wrong guesses. AUD's expression does not change. It means the land is wiser than we are, she says, and older. He laughs softly. You sound like a pagan. She ties another bundle. No, she says, I sound like someone who has buried too many certainties. Later, they walk together. The day has warmed slightly, and the path toward the stream is dry, scattered with pine needles and frost-hardened mud. The sun is low but strong, painting the stones in honey and pale gold. A pair of ducks drift quietly on the water, unbothered by their passing. They reach the bend where AUD often sits in the evenings. She lowers herself onto the broad stone there, motioning for Orleif to join her. For a while, They simply watch the stream. It moves slowly, glinting where it catches light, running smooth around pebbles, carving shallow lines into soil already softening for spring. Orleif removes a glove and dips his hand into the water. Still cold. It always is. He flexes his fingers in the current. You built something real here, he says. AUD doesn't reply. I mean it, he continues. This place feels settled. Even the stones feel like they've agreed to stay. She smiles faintly. I gave them time. He watches the stream a while longer. I've thought about staying, he admits. AUD turns toward him, surprised. He shrugs. I don't think I'm made for cities anymore. You were never made for cities, she replies. He laughs. Perhaps not. AUD brushes a hand along the moss beside her. But you'd want more than quiet, wouldn't you? He considers this. No, he says finally. Just fewer questions that expect answers. AUD looks out over the land, over the stone posts that mark boundary and belonging, over the furrows just beginning to green, over the ridge where the sky begins. This is a good place for that, she says. On the way back, they stop at the grave. It's small, humble, the stones stacked carefully, not tall but firm. A smooth piece of driftwood is wedged at the head, unmarked, weathered. AUD stands beside it, Orleif a step behind. He died alone. He asks. AUD nods, but not forgotten. He looks at her. And you buried him upright. I said a prayer, she says softly, one of mine, and placed a stone from the river in his palm. He says nothing for a moment. Then, some say the dead can't hear what they don't believe in. AUD closes her eyes. The wind passes gently over them. Then perhaps they hear only kindness, she murmurs. No matter the words. That night, Orleif helps mend a section of the sheep pen. He eats stew beside Lifa and the others. He drinks a small cup of warm mead and listens while one of the children recites a tale of foxes and buried treasure. No one asks where he will go next. No one asks who he prays to. When he steps outside before sleep, the stars are out, not many, but enough. AUD stands near the doorway, watching him. Leaving tomorrow, she asks. He nods. East. She gestures toward the fire inside. The path will still be here. He nods again, softer, as will the land. They say good night without ceremony, and in the morning he is gone. But the driftwood marker remains, and the stream flows on. The days began to shorten again. The change was almost imperceptible at first, a slight hesitation in the morning light, a softer curve to the sun's descent in the western sky. The shadows lengthened by a finger's breadth each day. The geese overhead began flying lower slower. Even the sheep, without being told, began lingering nearer to shelter after dusk. AUD noticed, but said little. She had been watching seasons long enough to know they did not require commentary, only respect. At the edge of Vamr, just beyond the last pasture, the ground sloped into a mossy rise, scattered with boulders, shaped by wind, left by ice. It was a place few visited, not out of fear, but because it asked for quiet. Even the children lowered their voices there. One morning, after rain had rinsed the air clean, AUD walked there alone. She brought nothing but her cloak, a pouch of dried fennel, and her staff, carved driftwood with a smooth grip from decades of use. Her boots sank slightly into the softened earth, leaving prints that would not last past noon. The mist clung low between the stones. Above, the sky was pale, brushed with faint yellow near the horizon. Not yet gold, but thinking about it. She stepped between the rocks without hurry, pausing now and then to touch a lichen-covered surface or to look out toward the fjord, where the water shimmered faintly under the cloud-stretched light. At the tallest stone, a squat pillar, naturally hewn, she stopped. She looked down at its base, then around the clearing. It was not a dramatic place. There were no towering cliffs, no dramatic views, but it was honest. Held, out of the wind, warmed by morning sun. The kind of spot that did not ask to be noticed, only remembered. Aud knelt. The soil was cold, but not unfriendly. She traced a line along the stone's edge with one finger. Yes, she said aloud, then stood again. That afternoon, she returned with Bergthur. He carried a small sack of pegs, a length of braided cord, and a quiet understanding. She pointed. He nodded. They measured the ground, marked a space with small wooden pegs at each corner. Not large, just enough. She asked that the head face east, not because of scripture, but because she liked the idea of sun hitting the face before anything else. They worked in silence. The birds provided the only soundtrack, soft and intermittent, like memory. Occasionally, Bergthur cleared his throat to mark thought, but never followed with words. She appreciated that. When the last peg was set, he straightened with a quiet grunt. "Would you like stones or earth?" he asked. "Both," she said. "Layered. Stone first, then soil, then wool." He nodded. "And standing?" he asked. She looked out across the field. "Yes," she said. "Upright. It feels proper." He looked at her, not questioning, just searching her face. "Then, I'll begin gathering." She placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "Not yet. There's time." He gave a single nod, then walked back toward the hall. She stayed a while longer, not thinking, just listening. In the days that followed, she began sorting. It was not dramatic. There were no announcements, no long sighs or symbolic gestures, just small movements. A spindle given to Lifa, a pouch of herbs left beside the hearth, a cloak folded and tied with a strip of blue wool. Quiet things, necessary things. She kept one cup for herself, carved from horn, its rim slightly chipped, and one knife, its handle smooth with decades of use. Everything else was made available. The children knew not to ask why. They simply accepted the gifts, as they accepted the frost, the wind, the return of spring. One evening, she sat by the fire with Ivar, now taller, now surer of foot. He was trying to learn the bone flute. She listened as he stumbled through the same 4 notes. "You're improving," she said. He snorted. "You're polite." "That too." He kept trying. The notes came softer, truer. After a while, he set it down. "Will you teach me to make a burial bed?" he asked. Aud looked at him. He didn't flinch. "Yes," she said, but slowly. The day she chose to prepare it was neither remarkable nor symbolic. It was simply the right one, dry, with low wind and clear light. The frost had lifted early, and the stones in the moss glowed faintly with morning heat. Bergthur met her with a cart, and together they gathered what they needed. The larger stones from the river path, wool from the back storeroom, cedar boughs, a strip of linen dyed with crushed berries. At the sight, the work was slow, but without strain. They placed stones in a ring, then layered wool and cedar inside. The scent rose, not strong, but clean. Earth and tree and something faintly like salt. Aud sat on the edge to test it. The ground didn't shift. She approved. When they returned to the hall, the sun had begun to dip. Fridas was preparing soup with fish and barley. Lifa was mending a wool cloak near the door. Koli was repairing a broken stool. Aud passed through the space without speaking, but her presence gathered attention anyway. Not concern, just noticing. She sat on the bench near the hearth and watched the fire. Later, she spoke with each of them. Small things, not farewells. There was no need. She reminded Lifa to turn the herbs, told Koli the posts near the western field needed checking, asked Ivar gently to remember the wind when playing his notes, to let the breath go where it wanted. Then, when the room grew quiet and the bowls had been emptied, she stood. "I'll sleep by the stones tonight," she said. No one stopped her. Fridas brought her a bundle furs, a water skin, dried fruit wrapped in cloth. Aud thanked her, placed a hand briefly on her wrist. "I'll see you in the morning," Fridas said. Aud smiled. "Maybe." Then she stepped into the night. The path to the stones was pale with moonlight. The air was cold, but not sharp. Her breath clouded only slightly, and stars overhead blinked like distant watchfires. She reached the burial bed and lay down, not stiffly, not with ceremony, just with care. She arranged the furs, folded her hands over her chest, closed her eyes. For a time, nothing happened, and that was the beauty of it. No wind, no voice, no revelation, only the slow breathing of the land. And in time, she matched it. They found her in the morning, peaceful, asleep but deeper. Fridas brushed her hair back from her face. Lifa wiped the dew from her cheeks. They said nothing. They did not cover her right away. They sat beside her first, let the sun warm the space before they laid the final wool across her body. Later, they stood back as the stones were placed. Upright, layered, firm. She faced east. There were no hymns, no songs, only a silence shaped like gratitude. There's a bend in the fjord path where the heather grows low and thick, blooming soft in early summer. The moss here is older, darker, pressed down in patches where feet have passed not just recently, but long before memory. Stones lie in odd patterns along the edge, some half-buried, others balanced strangely, as if placed with care and then forgotten by time. In the morning light, mist clings to the hollows, and the air smells of damp wool, old pine, and salt dried on driftwood. Nothing stirs but the grass. The birds have not yet returned to this patch, and the wind seems to move more carefully here, as if out of habit. It is a quiet place, and once it was a place of speaking. The memory lives not in stories, but in objects. A length of carved wood, found beneath packed clay, its top wrapped with copper wire, its base rounded smooth by handling. When lifted, it gives no sound, yet it fits neatly into a palm, as though made to be gripped not as a tool, but as something more ceremonial. The handle bears shallow patterns, interlocked spirals, uneven lines, the ghost of something animal and curling. It might have been a staff. It might have been a wand. No one knows who held it first, but it was held. In the time before words were inked, there was a woman who walked this path at dusk. No one remembered her name, but in the quiet space between fires, when the wool was being spun and the barley was steeping, someone might mention her in a low voice. She walked in bare feet. An old man said once, as he turned the spit over the hearth, even in winter. She spoke to the trees, and they answered. A girl whispered to her brother before sleep. She never entered the hall, only watched from the ridge. A woman added, as she sorted bones from broth, but no one claimed to know her, and no one said she was real. Not exactly. Once, a child found a pouch buried beneath a pile of rocks near the bend. The pouch was sealed with hardened sap, its leather cracked with age. Inside, bird bones, soft white, hollow and clean. A clump of unspun wool, curled tightly like a sleeping animal. And a single bead, amber, cloudy, pierced through the center. The pouch was reburied, not from fear, just respect. They called it Seiðr. Not often. The word was not spoken loudly, nor taught. It drifted through speech like mist there, but not clung to. It was something between a song and a spell, between breath and memory. No one said where it came from, only that some carried it, like cold in the joints or fire behind the eyes. In one house, they said it was the mother's mother, who used to hum to herself in the dark and tie knots in red thread. In another, a quiet uncle who spent more time with animals than men. In every case, it was someone different, and always, always a little apart. Not feared, not loved, just known. On some nights, not marked on any calendar, not connected to moon or sun, the weaving would stop early. The fire would be banked, but not brightened. And someone, not always the same, would step outside, just to walk, just to listen, down to the stream, up to the ridge, past the stones with no names. In the morning, there would be a line of herbs laid at the doorway, or a spiral drawn in soot on the hearthstone, or a bone needle placed beside the wool, its eye threaded with black flax. No one asked where these things came from. No one moved them until the next frost. Inside the hall, there was a bowl carved from soapstone, rarely touched. It sat on a high shelf behind a wooden panel, its edge etched with uneven circles, some worn almost flat. Once a year, maybe twice, it was brought down, rinsed in fresh spring water, filled with crushed bark and ash, heated over the fire. The smoke from it was light and sweet, with an undertone of bitterness, like something sacred but too old to understand. When it rose, it clung to the rafters for hours, long after the bowl was emptied and set away again. Children said the dreams that followed were always louder and full of color. No one claimed to be a vulva. The word was heavy, too heavy to hold openly. But there was a woman who lived in the furthest hut, near the stream where the willows bowed low. Her doorway was strung with teeth, not human. Small things, fox, hare, seabird. They clinked softly in the wind, like speech you couldn't quite hear. She spoke rarely, but when she did, her voice had the texture of riverbed stone, polished, slow. People came to her when dreams clung too tightly, or when children wouldn't wake properly, or when animals left without cause. They never stayed long. They never asked for more than was offered. And always she asked the same price: a handful of wool, a cup of fresh water, and silence. The staff was buried with her, so they say. But years later, when the ground was turned for planting, there was nothing, just a patch of earth softer than the rest, and a single feather embedded in the roots, dark but shimmering when held just so. In the north wind, sometimes you can hear the hum, not a voice, not a song, a vibration like breath caught between teeth. It moves through the branches, curls around chimneys, slips beneath door frames. If you stop to listen, it disappears. But if you keep working, it lingers. Some say it's the sound of Vardlocker, spirit-calling chants once sung in circles of 7, voices rising and folding into one another like wool underwater. But those who say so never explain how they know. They simply hum back under their breath. In spring, someone will leave thread tied to the branch of the oldest tree. It will be red, always red, frayed slightly at the ends, tied with care, but not too tightly, as if meant to unravel with time. By summer it's gone. No one sees it removed. No one ever speaks of putting it there. But the tree remembers. It always does. Seiðr was not taught. It was absorbed. Through the call of ravens overhead. Through the slow steeping of herbs. Through the shape of shadows at twilight. Through the feeling of water cupped in palms and breath held for one heartbeat too long. It lived in rhythm, not in rules. And like the tide, it came and went. One winter, a girl began to carve spirals into the beams above her bed. When asked, she said they helped her sleep. No one corrected her. They only watched, and made sure the beams stayed strong. Even now, in the settled days, when the tools are sharper and the fires more predictable, there are moments that feel older than the room they happen in. A pot cracks without heat. A child speaks in their sleep, in words no one taught them. A wind moves through the hall, though the door is shut, and somewhere a thread snaps, softly, as if it had held too long. Seiðr is not practiced anymore, but the land does not forget. It hums beneath the floorboards. It curls in the corners of dreams. It waits, not for revival, only for recognition. And in that recognition, there is peace. Like the quiet after a long song ends. Like a breath left unfinished, but not lost. Like the echo of something once woven, still warm in the hands. At the edge of the village, where the pasture meets the bramble slope, there stands a single post, withered smooth, waist-high, and ringed with moss. It leans slightly east, as if listening for something long gone. There's no carving on it now, at least none you can see. But run your fingers over its grain in the right light, and you might feel something, a ridge, a pattern, the faint track of a symbol worn soft by sun, by snow, by years of passing hands. No one claims it, no one tends it, and yet it's never moved. In spring, someone ties a sprig of juniper to it. Every year, always before the snow melts fully, before the lambs are born, before the first thunder of thaw shakes the roofs. The knot is plain. The string, sometimes wool, sometimes flax, sometimes leather, is looped twice and pulled snug. No bow, no flourish, just enough to keep the green in place until it dries to silver. By midsummer, it has fallen away. The ground takes it. These gestures are small, but they are not forgotten. A stone placed atop another beside the doorframe. A bone laid quietly beside a fence post. A circle of ash brushed faintly on the back of the hand before a journey begins. Not rituals. Not exactly. Just rhythms. Once a child fell ill, not with fever or cough, but with silence. She stopped laughing, stopped eating. Her eyes followed things that no one else could see. They brought her to the stream and cupped water into her mouth. Drop by drop, her mother sang lullabies until her voice frayed. Her brother left polished stones under her blanket, one each night. No one said the word curse. They simply watched and waited. On the third morning, the child sat up and asked for soup. No one asked what she had seen. She never said. But after that, she always touched the lintel twice before entering a room, just lightly, with her left hand. At the high hill, beyond the last line of barley, there is a ring of flat stones, not tall enough to stand out, not wide enough to form a circle. But if you sit there as the light fades, especially on nights when the wind carries the smell of wood smoke and thawing peat, you'll feel it. A hush, not silence. Just listening, the kind that makes you aware of your own breath, the kind that wraps around your ankles and stays there, soft as nettle thread. Lifa once found a bundle tied beneath her sleeping mat. 7 feathers, black and blue, bound with a hair she knew wasn't hers. She showed AUD. The old woman didn't blink. Did you dream? Yes. Good. Nothing more was said. Lifa kept the bundle in her pouch after that. She never told the others. In the autumn, when the winds begin to howl down from the mountain gaps and the fjord glints with deeper silver, the villagers begin to lay thin trails of salt, not in lines, but in curls, one behind the threshold, one near the animal pens, and one outside the door of the hall. No one speaks of them. If the wind scatters them by morning, no one replaces them. If they remain, the house feels warmer. A man named Eirik once tried to plow a new path beyond the standing stone on the northern edge. He said it would save time, that the slope was firm, that the old path twisted too much. He brought the oxen, 2 boys, and a pair of sharpened blades. They returned before dusk, empty-handed. He did not speak at dinner that night, and the next morning the old path was cleared instead. No one asked why. By the sea, in the cove where driftwood gathers in piles like forgotten language, someone arranges bones, fish, bird, whale, into simple patterns. Always 5. Always close enough to see, but far enough that you need to leave the trail to examine them. Sometimes they point toward the water. Sometimes they form a ring. Once they formed a spiral. By the next tide, They were gone. But the shapes linger in the sand like an echo pressed into earth. Ivar, growing taller now, once tried to collect them, the bones. He brought back 3. Clean, sun-bleached, still smelling faintly of salt. He hid them under his sleeping furs. That night, he dreamed of voices whispering backwards. The next morning, he returned them. He said nothing, just placed them gently back where he found them, and pressed both hands into the wet sand. From that day forward, he walked slightly slower by the shore, not afraid, just listening. Some winters, when the ice clings longer than expected and the firewood grows low, the women hang woven cords over the rafters, knotted in uneven numbers, dyed with elderberry and ash. They say it keeps the chill from settling in the bones. No one can prove this, but the cords remain until spring, and no one complains of pain while they hang. AUD, near the end of her years, once traced a spiral and barley flower on the hearthstone. It wasn't large, just wide enough to cover the space where her feet rested when she sat weaving. She didn't explain, but she stepped into it each morning with her left foot first and never swept it away. After she passed, Fridas found the same spiral drawn in thread at the bottom of her basket. Red wool, loose, unfinished. She left it there. The basket remains beneath the bench. The wind moves through the village in ways that never quite repeat. Sometimes it comes from the sea, crisp and briny, carrying gulls and creaking sail lines. Sometimes from the hills, cold and dry, rustling the heather and the thoughts no one says aloud. And sometimes, rarely, it comes from nowhere. A stillness first, then a single gust. Not strong, not bitter, but enough to lift the edge of a cloak or turn a sleeping child's hair. And in those moments, every door creaks at once, only slightly, then settles again. On nights when the stars feel closer, not brighter, just more present, someone will place a bowl of milk outside the threshold. Always whole milk, warmed if possible. If it's still there by morning, the cats drink it. If it's not, no one mentions it. But the next evening, the fire crackles higher without coaxing, and the stew simmers more evenly. No one thanks anyone, but gratitude settles into the floorboards just the same. What these things mean, no one explains. What they do, no one measures. They are not truths. They are not secrets. They are just the way things are. Old habits, passed through hands and hushes. Echoes, maybe, of a time when names were spoken softer and everything breathed together. Now they linger, like warmth in wood, like scent on wool, like the thread of something unspoken, woven gently between each day. And if you ask, no one will answer. Not because they can't, because the question has already faded. The older ones remember things in fragments, not stories exactly, just corners of stories. The texture of something folded long ago, set aside in a chest with no lock, and open now only when the air feels just right. They speak of gestures more than events. A hand raised, palm down, a pause before crossing a threshold. The way someone used to touch the rim of a bowl twice before serving stew. Not rituals, just habits worn soft over time, like the knees of old wool trousers. They do not claim to understand these things. They remember them the way one remembers the feel of a particular type of rain. Not the year, not the season, just the rain. How it moved on the skin, how it smelled. Lifa says she remembers her grandmother placing a stone on her chest before sleep. A smooth river stone, cool and round. She never knew why. When she asked, her grandmother had simply smiled and said, "So your dreams stay where they belong." Lifa doesn't use a stone herself, but sometimes, when sleep doesn't come easily, she lies very still and presses her hand to her chest, just above the heart, and breathes. The younger ones don't remember at all, not out of defiance, simply out of timing. They grow in warmth. and steadiness. In a world where things mostly work as they should, where fires light on the first try, and bread rises reliably, they see the woven cords above the hearth and think they are decoration. They pass the old post at the pasture's edge and never wonder what it meant to anyone. Sometimes they notice, briefly, the way someone older stands a little longer near the doorway before stepping inside, or how the older children walk around the cairn near the stream rather than over it. But if asked why, they shrug. Because. And keep walking. Ivar is one of the in-betweens. Not young enough to forget entirely. Not old enough to feel the thread tighten. He watches more than he speaks. When the salt curls are laid in autumn, he helps. Quietly, carefully, placing each grain with his fingertip rather than scattering. He asks no questions. But later, when he walks alone through the frost-laced dusk, he runs his fingers along the outer edges of the doorframe as he passes it. A private echo. A shape held between thumb and memory. One evening, he finds a small woven pouch tucked behind the bench near the fire. It is made of hair and wool, rough, uneven, dyed the deep rust red of rowan berries. He doesn't open it. He only sets it back exactly where it was, folding the blanket over it slightly more than before. That night, his dreams are long and wide, but without shape. When he wakes, he forgets them immediately, but they leave behind a sense of having been accompanied. Some say the forgetting began with the iron, when tools became sharper, straighter, more precise, when handles no longer bore the carved spirals, when a knife was just a knife, when a staff became just wood. Others say it came with the peace, with the settling, the fences, the grain stores, the small sense of permanence that crept into the timbers and made everything feel like it might last a little longer than before. There's no agreement, but no urgency either. It is not a forgetting in anger. It is a forgetting by ease, like a lullaby not sung because the baby sleeps without it. Still, the old signs remain. The twisted thread behind the loom, the carved bead sewn into the seam of the winter cloak, the marks in the soapstone bowl, filled only twice a year, and the hum, low and without melody, that sometimes rises when women spin wool in groups, especially during the darker months. Not a song, not speech, just sound. It's not taught, it's caught, and if you ask, they won't recall who began it, only that it started, and seemed to matter. Coley once told a story about a boy he knew long ago, who walked backward through his own footprints after visiting the stream. Every time, without fail. When asked, the boy said it was to keep the thin ones from following. Coley had laughed at the time. He tells the story now not with certainty, but with softness, as if unsure whether the boy had been afraid or simply careful. Then a pause. Then, he never got lost, though. That much I remember. The fire pit at the center of the hall still glows, with a particular color at certain times of year. Not always. Not with every wood. But when the right branch is burned, birch taken after the frost is broken, ash stripped with a bone knife, the coals gleam with a silvery blue at their edges. It doesn't last long. Just a few heartbeats. Fridas once noticed it while stirring stew. She did not comment. She only stirred a little slower. Later, she tied a new braid into her sleeve, just above the wrist. She never said why. No one asked. In the spring, someone always hangs a bit of wool from the eaves. Pale, almost white, pulled thin and long like a breath stretched across days. The wind pulls at it gently. Sometimes it unravels on its own. Sometimes it remains through the entire season, fading slowly under rain and sun until it's no more than a ghost thread. No one replaces it, but every year, there it is, hung with no name, removed by no hand. The older ones do not correct the younger when they forget. There is no scolding, no sorrow, only the quiet acknowledgement that some things, like mist or breath, must be let go when held too tightly. Some gestures remain not because they're taught, but because they are needed, and some fade when the need softens, like the outline of a footstep in moss, visible but vanishing. On a cold morning, Ivar walks to the high hill alone. The frost has returned. The grass crunches gently beneath his boots. His breath clouds the air. He doesn't know why he goes, only that something calls him softly, like the tug of a thread not tied to anything. He sits at the ring of stones, closes his eyes, and waits. Nothing happens. No voice, no wind, no sign, only the stillness, and the feeling of being very small, but not alone. When he stands, he feels lighter, not changed, not marked, just accompanied. Back in the hall, Lifa watches him enter. He nods once to her. She nods back. Neither speaks. But that night, she places a sprig of dried angelica beside his sleeping mat. He finds it, does not ask, tucks it beneath his pillow, and falls asleep quickly, without dreaming. The forgetting continues. Gently, quietly, not with erasure, but with soft edges. Some gestures remain, some fade, and in the space between, the village breathes. Time, like mist, moves through the rafters, between fingers, across fields. And always, something lingers. A thread, a hum, a gesture not quite lost, but not remembered either. Held somewhere in the stillness between stories. The seasons pass the same way the mist moves across the water, slowly, without instruction, without permission. They do not arrive in clean lines. They fade, drift, settle, like dust on a windowsill, like dreams left half-remembered in morning light. At Vamr, no one marks the solstice with ceremony anymore. No tall fires, no carved cakes, but people still pause on those days, especially when the sky burns low and gold across the fjord, especially when the shadows reach further than usual, brushing the doors in silence. They don't say why. They simply stand outside a little longer, their arms crossed loosely, as though listening to something already halfway gone. Fridas now keeps a small book, not of runes, not of scripture, but of plants and weather. Nothing formal, just scraps of detail. Rain after west wind, smell of salt. Found spiderweb on East Gate, 2 nights before frost. Child, said the river laughed. No one told her to write these things, but she does, and when others ask what it's for, she shrugs. Noticing, she says, so the quiet doesn't get lonely. Near the edge of the pasture, the old wooden post leans a little further each year. No one straightens it. No one carves new symbols into its face, but someone has begun placing pebbles at its base. Small, flat ones. Sometimes arranged in lines, sometimes piled in threes. A child, maybe. Or someone remembering the way a hand once moved over stone and left nothing but stillness behind. One day there is a feather tucked in the moss beside it. Blue-gray. Soft. It remains for 3 days. Then it's gone. At dusk, Lifa lights a small lamp with fish oil and thyme. She places it in the window nearest the fjord. Though no boats are expected and no visitors have come since the snow. The flame burns low, flickers once, and steadies. She doesn't watch it, just lets it glow. A soft kind of beacon, not meant to guide, not meant to call, only to be seen just barely, if anyone happens to be passing through the dark. The earth here holds more than soil. It carries grooves from carts no longer used, shallow bowls where horses once lay, hearthstones half buried beneath sedge. Near the stream, behind the stand of willows, there's a patch of ground that smells different, sweeter, richer. No one farms it, though the soil is good. Someone once found a comb there, bone with worn teeth and a broken end. It sat on the mantelpiece for a while, then disappeared. No one asked where it went, but the day after, The fire in the hull caught faster than usual, burning with a clear yellow glow. Ivar walks to the stream now and then, but he doesn't look for signs. He's learned that the signs don't behave like signs. They don't point. They don't instruct. They appear when the mind is quiet and disappear the moment you try to explain them aloud. He brings smooth stones sometimes and skips them across the water. He doesn't count the skips. He watches the ripples instead, the way they fold outward, overlapping and soft, touching the far bank without changing it. When he leaves, he always nods once to the willows. He doesn't remember when he began doing this, but it feels right. There's a sound that comes from the hills in late autumn. Not every year, just some. A hollow tone, like wind through hollow bone, like breath between two hands cupped around flame. It doesn't last long, a few minutes at most. Those who hear it never describe it the same way. Like someone remembering aloud, says Freydis. Like the earth exhaling, says Lifa. Like silence turning its head, says Ivar quietly. When it comes, people stop what they're doing. They don't panic. They don't smile. They just wait. And when it ends, they carry on. A little slower, a little softer. The burial field, where Aud lies, remains untouched. Not empty, just whole. The stones marking her place are low and plain. No names, no dates, just shape. Some mornings, a bird perches on the tallest one. Once, a ribbon of red thread was found tied around the base. It was damp from the rain, frayed at the ends. Lifa removed it gently, let it dry in the sun, then wrapped it around the wrist of the loom where Aud once sat. She didn't say why. She didn't need to. A visitor arrived once, many years later, a young woman from the east, traveling with merchants, drawn by curiosity more than duty. She asked questions gently, politely, about farming, about weather, about the old stories. She stayed one night. Before she left, she traced her finger along the inside wall of the longhouse, where a soot mark had darkened the grain in a spiral. She said nothing, but later, someone found a thread in her sleeping mat. Gray wool, twisted around a seed. No one touched it. They left it for the wind. These days, the hum returns only rarely. A low vibration in the chest, not heard but felt, especially when the air grows heavy with snow, especially when a candle flickers without breeze. Lifa sometimes hums back, not deliberately, not for anyone to hear, just as a way of continuing. A stone was found near the field once, half buried, carved lightly with spirals, a small hole through the center. It wasn't new, but it hadn't been noticed before. They left it in place, placed a cup of water beside it. In the morning, the water was gone, but the ground around it was dry. No one spoke of it. Only Ivar, much later, carved a matching spiral into the handle of his fishing blade. Just once. Not deep. Not to mark ownership. Only to remember the way the stone felt in his hand. Cool, still, familiar. Things do not end here. They settle. They return in shapes slightly changed, words slightly faded. A new child might laugh at shadows that curve in the corners. A goat might refuse to step over a certain patch of grass. A spoon might crack in a drawer on a windless day. And someone might pause, might whisper under their breath, might nod without knowing why. There's no keeper of the old ways. No book, no title, no ceremony. Only hands that fold thread. Only feet that step lightly over old stones. Only breath, rising and falling, remembering nothing specific, but forgetting nothing fully. The land listens, and answers, only when asked gently, only when not asked at all. The wind moves through Vamr, over rooftops, under lintels, between firs and firelight. It carries no names, but it carries something. Something like memory, something like a hum, something that waits in corners and curls behind doors. Not a secret, not a truth, just presence. And in that presence, there is rest. No ending, no beginning, just a thread beneath the wind, held and holding. Still, in the high valley above the fjord, the longhouse of Jarl Eyvind rests with the weight of its own presence. The beams are broader here, carved with serpents and bound in iron. The roof, freshly tarred, glistens like black stone in the rain. It creaks, but not with age, only with wind. There's space, always space. That is the first thing one notices when entering. The hall is wide and dim, lit by slanted shafts of pale light, filtered through horn-paneled windows. The fire pit is deeper than most, ringed with polished river stones. It does not burn fiercely. It simmers, controlled, deliberate. Even the smoke rises politely. Eyvind does not rush. His meals come in 3 stages, even when he eats alone. First, the hands are washed, not for hygiene, but for sequence. A servant girl named Tora carries a small copper basin, beaten thin and dented at the rim. She pours warm birch-scented water over the Jarl's fingers, while another pats them dry, with linen stiff, from overwashing. The towel bears a red border, stitched with a symbol no one remembers. Eyvind never looks at the basin. His eyes remain on the fire. The first dish is always the same. Slivers of dried fish brushed with honey and horseradish, arranged in a spiral on a slate plate. The taste is less important than the geometry. The bread is dark and chewy, made with finely sifted rye flour, imported naturally, not from the village fields below. Those breads are coarse, lined with husk and stone grit. He does not eat those. He hasn't since he was a boy. The meat is served tepid, spiced with clove and a pinch of saffron, meant to open the chest. He sips slowly, always with his left hand, a habit from years spent among the Eastern traders. No one corrects him. Around him, the servants move like wind through curtains, visible, but never loud. A cough would be a failure, a dropped spoon an offense. They do not speak unless spoken to. They do not eat until after. This is not cruelty. This is rhythm, and rhythm is comfort. The longhouse bears little resemblance to those below by the fjord. Here, there is room to walk without touching anyone. The benches are wide, sheepskin padded, the hides dyed in pale ochres and blues. The walls are hung with heavy weavings, patterned with stag and boar, a few with imported silk threads glinting faintly in the firelight. Most are decorative now. The meanings once sewn into them have faded like breath from morning glass. Still they are dusted. Still they are turned with the seasons. There is an ivory game board and laid into one of the tables. Nefatiful. The Jarl's father played often, every evening before the second cup of broth. Eyvind does not. The pieces are stored neatly in a carved box beside the hearth. He opens it sometimes, counts them, touches the king piece with his thumb, then closes the box. Without a game, it feels more important. He wears a belt of silver rings. They jingle softly when he rises, not loudly enough to announce movement, just enough to remind. His boots are of dark leather, softened by oil and stitched with a care that costs time more than coin. No one in the household knows how to repair them properly. When the sole began to crack last year, he sent them south with a merchant's son, along with a note. The boy returned 2 weeks later, bootless. The boots came 3 days after, wrapped in linen, restitched, silent. Eyvind said nothing, but the boy has not been sent again. At mid-morning, the hall is empty save for the fire and the Jarl. He walks to the southern wall, where a small opening faces the ridge. The view is long, bare trees against snow-marked stone. The fjord beyond like dull metal, smooth and impenetrable. He watches for a long time. The view never changes. That is the point. Below, the people gather at the stream. They wash, they trade, they carve and salt. Someone sings. Someone swears. Someone's goat breaks free. He cannot hear them from here. Not really, but he remembers the shape of the noise. The long house has 6 rooms, though only 4 are used. One holds the tools no longer handled, axes with carved handles, shields that no longer fit arms, helmets with the fur faded around the brow. Another holds linens, bundles of rushlight, a large ceramic basin that once held heated stones for bathing, but now holds nothing but dust and spiders. He does not use the bathing basin. He prefers the steam tent, an enclosed alcove near the back, where the firestones are arranged in a pit and birch leaves hang from hooks in careful arcs. He visits it each 7th evening, always alone, always at dusk. There, he breathes more deeply than usual, but not because he must, only because the heat invites it. The day passes like a slow cup. The silence is not oppressive. It is curated. There are times when the servants forget that not everyone lives like this, that most meals are taken sitting on logs, that spices are rare, that silence is not a gift but a punishment elsewhere. Still, they do not resent it. They watch the Jarl's habits, how he folds his cloak before sitting, how he lifts a spoon with 2 fingers, how he never finishes the last bite of any dish. They do not understand these things, but they follow them. There is safety in repetition, even if no one says so. At dusk, the outer door is opened for air. The wind spills and like a guest no one invited, but everyone tolerates. It carries the smell of peat smoke, damp wool, and the distant tang of fish brine. Ivan stands near the door, eyes half-lidded. He breathes in. He does not smile, but his shoulders lower just slightly. In the evening, a new robe is laid over the bench. It is made of thick wool lined with linen. The embroidery on the sleeve has begun to come undone, a line of red thread trailing like a thought interrupted. He notices, says nothing, but the next morning, Tora will find the robe folded neatly on the chest, the thread tied off in a tiny knot. He has fixed it himself. This, too, is rhythm. This, too, is control. The evening meal is taken without speech. A bowl of stewed lentils, a flatbread brushed with tallow, a small pear, dried and rehydrated in mead. He eats slowly, staring into the hearth. The fire has dimmed, coals glowing like slow embers beneath skin. The shadows stretch long now. They do not reach him, but they are moving, and that somehow feels proper. When the oil lamp is lit, the hall seems smaller, quieter. The wind presses against the shutters, testing them. Ivan places one hand on the edge of the table, lingers, then rises. He walks the length of the hall once, not to check, not to think, just to feel the floor underfoot, to note the way the light folds against the far wall. Then he returns to his place, folds the robe, and sits, not to rest, but to remain. Down the slope, where the wind arrives first and the frost stays longer, there stands a hut made of rough timber and packed turf, its walls stitched with moss, and its roof patched with pieces of old sailcloth. No carvings, no banners. The door creaks every time it opens, even after oiling. The creak is part of the house now, a kind of voice. Inside is always dim, always warm in the middle, always cold at the edges. The hearth is shallow and never goes out completely, though it doesn't burn clean. The smoke drifts sideways before finding the hole in the roof. The room smells of wet wool, boiled fish, a little ash, and something sour-soft from the cheese wrapped in linen and left too long in the corner. It is not elegant, but it is alive. Here lives Seiðr, along with her brother Halvar, their aging goat Inga, and 2 children who call Seiðr Mir, though she never bore them. No one remembers when they began saying it. She didn't teach them, but she didn't correct them either. There is one room, a bench for sleeping, a table for eating, and one narrow ledge under the eaves where sacks of barley are stacked in uneven order. The wall leans slightly. The bench creaks. The table is missing a leg, but balanced with a flat stone. Nothing is wasted. Even the silence is used. Halvor tends the nets. He rises early, more from habit than hunger. His joints click when he bends, a sound that pairs neatly with the thud of his boots hitting the packed floor. Seiðr doesn't wake easily. Not at first. But when she does so completely, rising in a single motion, tucking the wool around the children, tossing peat on the fire, all without speaking. The kettle goes on. The warmth arrives slowly, not as a flame, but as breath. There's a bowl for hand washing, not copper, just clay. Chipped at one edge. The water is cold. No towels, just the back of one sleeve. Still, Seiðr insists on washing. Every morning. Hands carry the day, she says, which may be wisdom, or may just be something her grandmother once said. The children copy her, sloppily, but it's a start. Breakfast is whatever didn't spoil. Often mash, sometimes broth, rarely bread. They chew slowly, less from reverence than from the toughness of the crust. Still, there's gratitude, not spoken, but present. Halvor always gives the first bite to the goat. She accepts it with regal indifference. The hut does not echo. There isn't enough space. Words hit the walls and fall flat, so voices stay low. Conversations are practical, brief. Is the net mended? Did the bucket crack? Is there salt left? But sometimes, in the evenings, after the fire is built up and the children are already sleeping in a tangle of limbs and linen, Seiðr speaks, without necessity. A memory, a thought, once a question. Do you think the Jarl dreams of heat or of silence? Halvor replied, he probably dreams of not dreaming. That was all, but they both laughed, quietly, as if someone else might hear. There is no silk in the hut, only wool, and wool pretending to be softer than it is. The clothes are patched, but clean. The curtains are sacks, cut and restitched to hang without pride. The best thing in the room is a comb carved from driftwood. It has no decoration, but it fits perfectly in the hand. Seiðr uses it each night before sleep. She says it keeps her from unraveling. Whether she means the hair or something else, no one asks. Time is not managed here. It's carried. The days move like water over stone, slow, inevitable, shaping without urgency. The sun comes in through one crooked window at the same angle every morning. By the time it touches the hearthstone, it's time to stir the pot again. That's the only clock, and even it can be ignored if the fire is low. Visitors rarely come. There's little to offer and less to impress. But when they do, Seiðr lays out the linen, the one without holes. She heats broth, dusts the table, and opens the shutters to let in the kind of light that makes everything look slightly cleaner than it is. No one stays long, but they leave warm. And that, she says, is what matters. Once, they were invited to the Jarl's Hall, a midwinter feast, everyone from the valley, by name or by obligation. Halvor shaved for the first time in months. Seiðr wore a brooch shaped like a bird, given to her by a woman who died the next spring. They ate slowly, cautiously, not used to the softness of the bread or the scent of unfamiliar herbs. They admired the weavings, the polished stone bowls, the heat that came from a fire too far away to see. But afterward, on the walk home through packed snow and starlight, they said nothing until Seiðr whispered, "Too many kinds of silence." Halvor nodded and said no more. Here, the silence is shared, not imposed. It stretches across the table like a blanket, not between people, but around them. It holds rather than separates. Even the goat understands it. She bleats only when the soup is truly late. Seiðr's days are filled with doing. Her hands never still. She braids cord from nettle fibers, plucks burrs from the children's tunics, stirs porridge with the kind of attention most give to prayer. She is not religious, but she believes in small things done properly. A knot tied tight, a pot scrubbed clean, a thank you said before sleep. She keeps a pouch beneath the bed. It holds 3 stones, one smooth, one rough, one that looks like a heart but isn't. No one knows she keeps them, not even Halvor. Some nights, when the wind howls like a child lost, she takes the pouch out and places the stones on the windowsill. She never explains why, but they're always gone by morning, and always return by evening. In spring, when the ice melts and the world begins to smell like grass again, the hut leaks. Rain comes through 3 corners, running down the back wall and puddling beneath the bench. They collect it in pots, use it for washing, laugh about it if it isn't too cold. Halvor once tried to fix the leak with a patch of hide and some salt. It worked for a day. Then the wind returned. Perhaps the house wants to drink, he said. Seiðr nodded. Houses have thirst too. They left the bucket in place after that. It seemed polite. One child has begun asking questions. Not about gods. Not about rules. About shapes. Why does the steam rise and spiral? Why do the crows land on that tree and not the others? Why do you blow on your hands before making dough? Seiðr answers with half-truths. The spiral is the air remembering how to dance. The crows land where the wind likes their feathers. My hands carry the memory of the bread. The child accepts these. For now, the goat dies in her sleep. No drama, just stillness. They bury her in the slope behind the hut, beside a stone shaped vaguely like a nose. No marker, only a handful of clover planted where the grass doesn't usually grow. The children don't cry much. They draw her in charcoal on the wall. Halvor pretends not to look at it too long. Seiðr adds a single white pebble to her pouch. There is no firelight grandeur here. No saffron. No silver belts. But the soup simmers each night. The hearth burns low and steady, and the silence hums with closeness, with breath, with threads woven through motion and shared sleep. It was not a day that asked to be remembered. Gray sky, damp ground, the sort of day that smelled of turned soil and wool left too long on a line. No frost, no storm, no birdsong either, just air, heavy and undecided. A quiet Tuesday of a century. And yet, that was the day the messenger came. Not a rider, not a herald, just a boy from the valley, thin and pale, cheeks pink from wind and nervousness, standing in the doorway of Seiðr's hut, water dripping off the hem of his tunic. He carried no token, no seal, only words, softly spoken, eyes downcast. The Jarl wishes a garment repaired. It was not, strictly speaking, a request, but it wasn't quite a command either. It floated somewhere in the space between courtesy and obligation, wrapped in polite silence, as soft and insistent as smoke. Halvor grunted from the bench. He has women enough for mending. Seiðr looked up from her stitching. He has women enough for weaving. He has none for remembering the old seams. There was a pause, the kind of pause where disagreement almost enters, then remembers its place and stays quiet. Seiðr wiped her hands and stood. The boy did not meet her eyes when he handed her the bundle, folded neatly in waxed cloth, still faintly warm from being carried under a cloak. She nodded once. That was all. The cloth, when unwrapped, unfolded slowly, heavier than expected. A tunic, deep blue, dyed with woad, embroidered at the throat with a pattern more elaborate than necessary. The thread was red, almost vermilion, and the weave was tight, but uneven in places. A thread had snapped under the collar. Not torn, not worn, just given way. Seiðr held the edge in her fingers. Not mending, she murmured. Reckoning, She worked quietly. No audience. No prayer. Only the sound of thread pulling through linen, and the occasional snap of her wrist as she tugged the line taut. She didn't use the fine needles, though she had one tucked away in her pouch from years past. She used the bone needle halver carved for her, the one that always leaned left. It made the stitch a little crooked. She did not correct it. When the garment was ready, she wrapped it again in cloth, one of her own, washed and dried by the stove, not because it mattered, but because it felt more honest. She tied it with a bit of gray yarn and placed it in the basket with the rest of the errands. 2 bundles of dried herbs, a spool of thread, and a jar of rendered fat. "I'll go," she said. Halvor blinked. "You," she shrugged. "He'll expect a servant. Might as well be surprised." The walk up to the longhouse was neither long nor difficult, but it was steep, and lined with stone that had been arranged, not simply fallen, placed just so, in straight edges that spoke of ownership and intention. The wind was sharper here, colder, less curious. The gate stood open. Of course it did. Gates in such places were more for signaling than for defense. Seiðr paused before passing through. She adjusted the basket, brushed a speck of soot from her sleeve, then stepped inside. The warmth hit her first, not the biting, eager heat of a hearth stoked to life after a cold day, but the slow, confident warmth of a fire that never dies out. It was the warmth of comfort earned long ago and never questioned since. It soaked the beams, perfumed the air with a mix of juniper, meat, and something faintly bitter, perhaps a foreign root, or old. Dry herbs burned for scent rather than medicine. The floorboards gave nothing underfoot. She might as well have been walking on pride. The servant who received her wore a cloak lined with fox fur. Not new, but well kept. His hands were clean, his hair tied. He looked at her, then the basket, then her again. "You're not," he began. "No," she said, "but the Jarl asked for a garment. I brought one." A pause, then a flick of his eyes. "This way." The longhouse opened like a mouth, wide and warm, with shadows folded into its corners. She had not seen this place in years, not since the feast, when the soup was too sweet and the bread too soft. It looked the same, too large for living, too quiet for comfort. The Jarl sat near the fire, as always, straight-backed, hands resting lightly on his thighs, gaze turned toward the flames with the patience of a man who expects his thoughts to arrive eventually. He did not rise when she entered. He did not speak right away. He looked at her, then at the basket, then back to the fire. "Was the thread strong?" he asked. Seiðr stepped forward. She placed the wrapped tunic on the table beside him. "Stronger than the cloth," she said. He nodded once. "Not many stitch like that anymore. Not many wear garments that argue back." He allowed himself a slow blink. "That's true." A pause. The fire popped once. She did not sit. He did not offer. They remained like that for some time. Not awkwardly, just precisely, as though each breath had a place, and neither wished to crowd it. Finally, he lifted the tunic, unfolded it, ran a finger along the seam. "She'll hold. She'll stretch," Seiðr said, "but she won't break." He folded it again, more carefully than before. "Do you think I should stop wearing it?" She looked at him. Then simply no. A pause. "Why not?" "Because things that resist you are often the ones worth keeping." He studied her then, not rudely, not intensely, just enough to notice her boots were damp, her sleeves patched, her left hand slightly red from thread burns. He did not ask about her hearth, or her food, or her roof. Instead, he nodded once, and reached for a pouch beside his seat. "Payment," he said. She tilted her head, then smiled faint crooked. "Keep it," she said. "You'll need it for the next tear." He looked down at the pouch, then tucked it away again. "You'll bring it?" "If I feel like it." As she turned to leave, he spoke again. "Does your hearth smoke?" She stopped. "Yes." A pause. "Mine doesn't." She glanced back. "It wouldn't." He gave the faintest curve of a smile, almost lost in shadow. "Is that better?" She considered it. "Then no, just different." He nodded. "You're right." Outside, the wind had softened. The gate stood open as before. She stepped through without looking back. Her boots found the mud easily. The hill was no steeper than before. The air smelled of fire and moss and something sweet she couldn't name. And the warmth she carried now had nothing to do with wool. Back at the hut, Halvor looked up from the bench. "Well, stitched." He nodded. She set the basket down, tossed him the jar of fat. "Was it warm?" he asked. "Enough." "Did he thank you?" "Enough." He grinned. That was that. Later that night, she found a thread at the bottom of the basket. Not hers. Red. Silk. Curled in a small spiral. She left it on the windowsill. Didn't touch it again. By morning, it was gone, and the light that entered the hut felt quieter. Not warmer. Not brighter. Just slightly more polite. The tunic was never worn again. Not because it failed. The seam held. The cloth stayed true. The embroidery still gleamed with quiet pride along the neckline. But it had changed somehow. Or rather, it had been witnessed, touched by hands that did not live in polished halls, stitched by fingers that smelled of wood smoke and broth. It had absorbed the rhythm of a hut where children slept in bundles, where nettle string was boiled soft before twisting, where mending was not art but necessity. And so it remained folded, not forgotten, just set aside, like a song once sung too close to truth. In the Jarl's longhouse, the days moved on. Fire, basin, bread, broth. The mead still simmered with saffron. The servants still passed, like breathless wind between the benches. The silver belt still rang faintly with each step. But something had tilted, just slightly. A pause now before each cup was raised. A glance at the stitching on the sleeve. A softness to the way the fire was stirred, not with the iron poker, but with a carved stick, pale wood darkened at the tip. The stick had no history, but it felt familiar. The Jarl used it for 3 days, then placed it in the chest with the game pieces and shut the lid. It did not reappear. Down the slope, in the hut, the red thread remained missing. Solveig didn't look for it, not because she didn't wonder, but because she knew better than to chase things that leave on their own. Instead, she combed her hair slowly by the fire, wrapped cheese in fresh cloth, braided another length of cord. The children argued softly over a piece of dried apple. Halvor mended a net by lantern light, muttering at the knots. And the hut breathed. In, out, steady, whole. People from the valley spoke, now and then, of the Jarl's silence. He was always a quiet man, but quieter now. He nodded more, listened longer, smiled sometimes, but without showing teeth. He once declined a second serving of pork, and instead requested barley stew. When it arrived, thick and plain and flecked with ash from the hearth, he ate it without comment, then folded the spoon in his napkin and placed it beside the bowl. The spoon was bone, not ivory. That too was noticed. No one remarked on change aloud, but the cook began keeping a second pot by the edge of the fire, lower heat, rougher cut, less spiced. The servants adjusted their pace, a little slower, less performative. The towels remained stiff. The basin remained brass. But now and then, one of the girls dipped her own fingers into the wash water after the Jarl finished, and held them there for a breath longer than needed. Not because it was her turn, just because the water was still warm. One evening, the Jarl asked for the game pieces. He opened the box. The king was missing. No one knew why. No one admitted to moving it. He closed the lid and did not ask again. There are things in life that do not break. They bend, they fade, they drift out of reach, but they do not shatter. They simply wait, like a loom kept oiled for no reason, like a bench near a fire where no one sits, but which no one moves either, like a memory stitched crooked into a garment no longer worn. Seiðr found the red thread a week later. It was knotted around the handle of the bucket near the hearth, not tied for use, just looped gently, a gesture, a whisper. She unknotted it, looked at it, then tied it into the fringe of her apron, where no one could see it but her, not to keep it hidden, only to keep it near. The winter that followed was long. Snow came early, stayed longer. Salt was harder to find. Smoke thickened beneath the eaves. But no one suffered more than usual, and some, perhaps, suffered less. The hut was drafty, but laughter lingered longer between the cracks. The longhouse was warm, but the silences grew softer, not emptier, just more generous. By spring, the tunic was gone, not thrown away, not burned, simply passed on. Some said it was gifted to a trader heading east. Others said it was given to a quiet man who mended carts and wore no rings. No one confirmed either story. It doesn't matter. The stitch held. That's enough. Halvor planted garlic along the southern edge of the hut. He said the soil felt different this year, less stubborn, more willing. The children made dolls from leftover straw. Seiðr placed one in the rafters, not for decoration, just so the roof wouldn't forget what it held. One morning, just before sunbreak, a bird landed on the windowsill. Not rare, just brown, feathered in ordinary dust. But it looked in, stayed, tilted its head, then flew away. Seiðr watched it go, then went back to folding linen. Things that last are not always made to last. They are mended, held, noticed aloud. The fire doesn't know what it burns. The wind doesn't care whose roof it presses. But people leave behind shapes, in thread, in bowls, in the way water is poured, or not poured, after someone leaves. There is no ending to wealth, no point where richness says, now I am complete. Nor is there an end to simplicity, only more of it, deeper, wiser, more worn in the elbows. The Jarl still wears silver, but no longer every day. Seiðr still folds linens, but with a softness she never used before. The difference is not in power, it's in pause. That spring, when the last snow melted in the shadow of the high ridge, someone placed 3 pebbles at the base of the Jarl's gate. Small, unmarked, set side by side. He stepped over them, did not move them, and when the snow came again the next year, they were gone. But the ground held the memory of weight. In the end, what mattered remained. A seam that held, a hut that hummed, a fire that warmed more than one kind of hunger. And between them, between high hall and sloping sod, something invisible but gently binding, like a thread tied once and never untied. And so our story drifts to a close, not with an ending, but with a quiet fold in time, like a page gently turned in a book that never truly finishes. The people we met today, their footsteps long faded, their fires long cooled, still leave soft traces behind, in the way we mend a garment, or pause at the sound of wind in the trees, or sit quietly beside someone we care for, without needing to speak. Time carries us forward, but it also circles back, and sometimes, in the hush between moments, the past whispers, not to teach, not to warn, just to be known. If this story brought you a little peace, or helped ease the weight of the day, you are gently invited to like, to share, or to subscribe, but only if it feels kind to do so. Only if this quiet corner of history feels like a place you'd like to return to. And if you're still here, with your eyes beginning to close, and the world growing softer around you, Then I hope this time together brought you a sense of calm, a small warmth, a still breath. Rest well, dream gently, and come back tomorrow for another story, another slow step through time, told just for you.